Hi, as elections draw near, you may or may not decided on who will get your vote. Today, we have a look back at the interview between BBM and Boy Abunda, and we break down his answers on key issues. My name is Mark DeCastro. Welcome to Conservativo.
Philippine debt.
Yes.
I'd like you to listen to these statistics from the Bureau of the Treasury. Nang matapos ang termino ni President Erap, ang utang ng Pilipinas ay 2.6 trillion pesos. Nung natapos si President Arroyo, ay 5.1 trillion pesos. Umabot sa 6.5 trillion pesos noong matapos ang termino ni President Aquino. As of end November 2021, ngayong administration of President Duterte, total Philippine debt is 11.93 trillion pesos. Naririnig natin yan na hindi pa ipinanganganak, nagbabayad ka na ng utang dahil sa laki ng utang ng Pilipinas. Katanungan ko ito. Kung ikaw ang papalaring manalo bilang presidente ng Pilipinas, how do you intend to pay the national debt of the country?
By revitalizing the economy. There's no other way. There is no other way to do it. We have to create value in our economy, and that value will be what we will use to service those debts. Hindi naman siguro kailangan, lalo na ngayon na medyo hirap tayo. Although if you look at the overall statistics globally, we are at about under 60% ratio to GDP.
Debt to GDP.
Debt to GDP. There are other countries that are close to 100. Meron pang lampas sa 100, nagwa 120%. So we are in a relatively good position, but we find ourselves in this quandary now because of COVID, and we really had to fund a lot of what we were doing to battle COVID by borrowings.
So what a lot of people don't know is that borrowing is actually good for countries. It is a normal thing that a lot of the big countries do. The biggest country actually that owe the most money to other countries is actually the United States of America. The United States of America owes more money than any other country in the world. So borrowing is something that is normal for countries to do. It's not a bad thing when you see countries borrow more. A lot of people get scared, for example, when they see the Philippines borrowing more and more money. But for example, as long as the Philippine economy is growing at this rate, the borrowing can exceed a certain rate. It's totally normal for the country, so don't be worried about this.
Now, the only way that we can recover from that is to, as I said, revitalize the economy. People, you and I are the same. Takot na takot sa utang kasi yun ang ugali naman ng Ilocano, ayaw talaga may utang. But in the business world, to maximize whatever funding you have, you take on some debt. So that imbis na 100,000 ang pera mo, nakakuha ka ng 200, 300 na utang, mas marami kang magagawa, mas magandang negosyo mo, madali mong bayaran yung utang. The secret, I think, the important thing that we must be absolutely sure of is that pag kailangan talaga ng utang, mahirap mangutang, ayaw natin gawin yan, ngunit paminsan-minsan kailangan talaga natin gawin yan, tiyakin naman natin na napupunta sa tama. Napupunta sa magandang programa, hindi napupunta sa bulsa ng kung sino man lang. Hindi naman nawawaldas, nasasayang lang dahil sa walang kwentang paggamit. We have to make sure that the debt that we are taking on is put to good use so that it generates something in the economy, so that we have something, not only do we make a profit out of it, but we're able to service the debt. It's the implementation really of the pagda-download ka ng utang is the implementation really of how that funds are used that is going to decide whether or not malulubog ka sa utang o yung utang mo ay pagagandahin ang takbo ng ekonomiya.
So this is another great point about BBM. All of the politicians are basically talking about curbing corruption. Now, one thing that I think the Duterte administration did that was pretty good was they would borrow money, and then the country who lent them the money would also do the construction. You see Japan doing this a lot, where Japan will lend Philippines the loan, but to safeguard the loan and to protect the loan from things like corruption, Japanese contractors have to do the work. Japanese consultants have to be there. Of course, they're going to partner with Filipinos, and they're going to be Filipino engineers and people on the ground and workers and construction people. But whoever is lending the money, perhaps there should be a safeguard that that country also needs to be involved. Basically, exactly what Japan is doing with JICA.
There was a time, I'm not sure if this is still happening, but 20% of the national budget would go to debt management. Pero may mga data tayo na nagsasabing, I think this was published, that 20% of the national budget goes to corruption.
Yes. That's,
20% of the national budget goes to corruption.
well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If it's going to go into corruption, wala talaga, palubog na tayo ng palubog. The corrosive effect of corruption in the private sector, in the public sector, in any kind of transaction, immediately destroys the transaction.
What would you do?
So I have not seen this study that Boy Abunda is talking about. Well, what's interesting is both Marcos and Leni Robredo both agreed and said, yeah, that's something accurate, that 20% of the entire national budget goes into corruption. So 20% of, for example, 5 trillion, I think, is the national budget. That means 1 trillion is going to corruption? Is that real? How is that possible?
As president.
Well, you have to tighten up our checks and balances to make sure that the money that we are getting, and paying interest on, is used for good things, proper things. It's handled properly. As I said, it's not hindi nababawasan ng mga korap. Buo ang ipapadala mo sa programa, at maganda yung programa na pinaglagyan mo ng pera na yun.
We have normalized the concept of SOP in this country.
Yes.
What do you do to that?
Well, you just have to minimize it, and you have to put it.
But it cannot be totally eradicated, just mitigated.
Corruption is not a Philippine condition. It is a human condition. There are dishonest people wherever you go. And there will be always somebody who's trying to finagle the accounts, who's cooking the books na para meron siyang mabulsan. So, pero kailangan bantayan ng mabuti yan. And that's something, the idea of SOP, that is also comes from the efficiency of government. Why do I say that? If the government's very efficient, very streamlined ang trabaho, walang fixer. Di ba? Wala kang kailangan bayaran. Dahil, normal yun eh. Kukuha ka ng passport, kukuha ng lisensya, maglalakad ka ng permit ng papeles mo. May pinalapit na fixer, anong kailangan mo? Magbabayad ka na naman. Bawat dokumento na pipirman, babayad ka na naman. Yan yung, that's the corruption on the small scale. But, of course, the checks and balances also have to work.
So again, this corruption, the Boy Abunda pointed out, all of the candidates, Leni, Isko, BBM, all have the same reaction that corruption is a big issue in the Philippines. So perhaps what needs to happen is the government, BBM is doing something well right now. He's talking about the implementation of things, perhaps via technology. So to eliminate the human corruption factor of things, perhaps technologies should be implemented in more and more things. Like, for example, if you want to get a driver's license, perhaps you should be able to just, if you already have a driver's license, perhaps you should be able to just order one online, pay with your credit card, and they send it directly to your house. So you avoid having to go to different places. And perhaps instead of having a lot of cops, a lot of MMDA, when I say cops, I mean MMDA officers on the highway, perhaps it would make more sense if everything was automated, if there was cameras who would take pictures of traffic violations. And perhaps you can do a lot of this stuff automation. Those are two very simple examples. That will show you how technology can limit a lot of the corruption. I personally was hoping to see BBM and Leni talk more about technology in terms of limiting corruption. But the interesting thing about what BBM said to me is that he talked about improving government efficiency to limit corruption. I hope he implements a lot more technology to do so, but perhaps he's looking at other things. What I would like for any of these politicians to actually say is to perhaps study Singapore's model a little bit more on how Singapore increased the salary of a lot of government officials so they would have something to lose when it came to corruption. So 5 minutes is really not enough to talk about corruption. Boy Abunda should just do a 1-hour show with all the candidates and talk about corruption. It is a major issue that is plaguing not only the Philippine economy, but almost every economy all over the world. Corruption is a big, big thing. What I liked with BBM is he acknowledged that one way to really curb a lot of the corruption is to minimize a lot of interaction between people and people who can potentially ask for bribes and things. So if talking about making the government run better may indeed eliminate a lot of the corruption, at least on the smaller scale level. I wanted to see him talk more about technology, but perhaps it's on one of his vlogs. That's just what I think. What do you think? Let us know by commenting and liking our page. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. Stay safe, stay free, and God bless.